10-Minute Jazz Lesson, episode 37. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson podcast. My name is Nick Manella, and I am your host. On this show, if you are new to it, we take you through a short and concise jazz lesson every single week to help you improve your jazz playing and improvising. And each and every week, we have a free PDF download that you can find at our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com. That's the number 10minutejazzlesson.com. A few housekeeping items before we get going. I wanted to remind you guys to keep those ratings and reviews on iTunes coming. That really helps with our ranking in the podcast shows and gets the show out to more people. So if you've got, 30 seconds to spare, just log on to iTunes, find the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson podcast, and leave us a rating and review. It really helps us out. Thank you so much to everybody that's done that already. We also want to mention that this show runs on the support of our listeners, and we really depend on you guys and your monthly donations to keep the episodes coming and keep them quality. So what you can do is on our website, on the sidebar, you can find our PayPal donate link, and then when the prompt comes up, you can put in a recurring donation, and our suggested donation is $5 a month, not all that much money. You probably barely even miss it. One less coffee per month to get these awesome jazz lessons delivered straight to you every week. All right, let's get into it. So today's episode is going to be about maybe one of the most important topics when it comes to sounding good playing over jazz chord changes, and that is the concept of chord tone timing. So let's unpack this term a little bit. So what we're talking about, first of all, is chord tones. If you don't know what chord tones are, basically that's either the 1, 3, 5, or 7. Those are the chord tones, the most important notes in the chord. You'll see that that's the triad of the chord, which we covered in depth last week, and also the seventh on top of it, which is really critical to jazz chords. Most jazz chords have a seventh somewhere in them. The majority of the time. So when we talk about chord tones, we are talking about 1, 3, 5, or 7. And when we talk about timing, we're talking about when we are going to play those chord tones within a given measure. So today we're going to talk about 4/4 time because it's the most common time signature that all jazz is played in. Followed shortly by 3/4, but again, this is the 10-minute jazz lesson podcast, not the 1-hour jazz lesson podcast. So we've got to sort of stay on point. So we're only going to cover 4/4 time today. So we know what chord tones are, and now we've talked about the concept of timing. So how do we put this all together? So basically, the skeleton of a great solo means that chord tones will always fall on the strong beats of the measure. Now, you might be thinking in jazz that the strong beats are 2 and 4, but that is only rhythmically. So like when we count a tune in jazz, typically we go, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're not talking about those strong beats. We're talking about harmonically what the strong beats are. Now, you'll notice that in probably, 99% of jazz tunes, the chords change on beats 1 and 3. More than likely, they'll just change on 1, but if you're playing a more complicated tune that moves along more quickly with the harmonic timing, you'll notice that there could be a chord change on 1 and then another one on beat 3. So this really makes sense for us to time our chord tones to coincide with when the chord changes. So that would be beat 1 and beat 3. Now, this can really, really help you from going from a sort of discombobulated sound to your solos to really having a very clear and proper way of playing solos where you're very clearly outlining the harmony. By timing the chord tones and placing each one of those chord tones on a strong beat, you're basically saying through your instrument that you know what's going on. You know when the chords are You know when the chords are changing, and you know exactly what the important notes in those chords are. So it's a pretty simple concept. Hopefully you understand it. Basically what I'm saying is you need to play a 1, 3, 5, or 7 on each beat 1 and 3. And that'll give you a good skeleton for your solo. So how do we put this into action? Well, I have a really good system for you. The first thing that you want to do is you want to sit down with a piece of staff paper. And let's start with the blues, because we basically do everything over the blues, and you guys know that that's my favorite sort of vehicle of expression. So we take the blues, we write out the changes, all right? Then what we go through and do is we write out a chord tone on every single measure on beat 1 and beat 3. And this is going to give us the skeleton for our solo. So here's the one that will be in the PDF that's included for you this week. This is the skeleton of the solo that I'm going to fill in later on. But hear what it sounds like with just the skeleton. So you can hear that actually sounds pretty clear already, right? And that's the point, is that we're playing those easily recognizable notes that really work over each chord change on the strong beats. So it already gives us a nice sense of where we're going to go with the solo. So now what I did, you'll look at example number 2 on your sheet, is that I filled in the spaces so that it actually sounds like a real solo that I would play. Now here's a couple of words of advice for you. On the first couple of times that you do this, I want you to physically write out the solo. So sit down and logically figure out how you're going to connect these chord tones together. I wouldn't suggest doing it on the fly with just your instrument at first, because it'll be too tough for you if you've never done this before. So by sitting down and actually thinking about it, and it's almost like doing a math problem, that will get your mind into the right space to eventually be able to do this on the fly. So do like I did. On the second chorus, I just sat down and I wrote out what I wanted to play, making sure that I was playing the strong beats, playing the chord tones on every strong beat, and I was coming into each chord tone in a logical way, meaning I'm not jumping from an octave away. I'm not doing anything that sounds, funky. I'm trying to make it as good a voice leading as possible, and all of my attention is really focused on these chord tones. So here's what it sounds like filled in, and you'll notice that even though the solo has gotten a lot more busy, it's retained its sense of hitting the important beats on the important notes. So important notes on important beats. That's basically the gist of this episode. So here's example number 2. So you can hear that sounds like an actual solo, right? I've filled it in. I've used some other devices. I'm drawing on a lot of other skills that I have, but the one thing that remains constant is the fact that there are chord tones on strong beats. So that's about it. That's your 10,000 foot view of chord tone timing. I really feel like if there's one thing that you can work on to make your playing so much better, this is probably it. This is one of the core concepts of playing bebop well. If you were to open the Omni book and take a look at a bunch of Charlie Parker's solos, or honestly, anybody's solos for that matter, anybody who plays well, you're going to find more often than not on the strong beats or when the chord changes, there's going to be a chord tone. So put some time in on this because this could really seriously improve your playing by leaps and bounds if you take it seriously. So take the skeleton that I've provided you and come up with 5 different versions of a solo. Write them out, practice them, and then after you get really, really comfortable with that, take the same skeleton but don't write anything out. Keep the skeleton in front of you and then try to improvise your way from one chord tone to another and see how that works out for you. As always, if that's too tough, slow it way down. There's no shame in going slow. That's like one of the most important things that you can possibly do. So if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me at nick@10minutejazzlesson.com, and I will definitely get back to you as soon as I possibly can with any questions you might have. And if you really want to get deeper into this, visit the Skype lessons page, and we can set up some Skype lessons and really get down to the nitty-gritty of this. All right, everybody, make sure you go and check out the website. Go on to iTunes, leave us a rating and review. And please, if you enjoy the show, please consider donating $5 a month. We would really appreciate it. All right, we'll see you next week. Have a good one, everybody.